send you a copy when we're done.
Great, thank you so much.
There we go.
Okay,
Good evening, everyone. Hello. Marilyn, did you have anything to say to start?
I was just going to say hello, a brief announcement to thank everyone for joining us and to also thank John. I'm going to let John introduce himself because he does a much better job at it than I will. And I just wanted to advertise that we have our new online newsletter. Our email newsletter is been revamped. It's fabulous. So if you aren't already subscribed to our email newsletter, please do that at our website. And you won't miss any of the upcoming programs that we have. Again, thank you so much for attending. If you have any questions during the program, you can, Bob is sharing his, John, are you Bob?
No.
Bob is, Bob, you are sharing your screen.
Bob, you need to stop your screen share.
Okay. John, I think as the host, you might have to stop Bob's screen share.
Let me see if I have that. Stop participant sharing there.
Okay,
Hold on. And I'm also going to make it impossible for anyone else to share screen just as a precaution. There.
Thank you. And just like a further commercial announcement, if everyone would please turn on their mute. And then if you have any questions, you can enter them into the group chat and we will ask John the questions. And then at the end, if people do want to talk or chat it live on Zoom, then we can do that. But during the program, we just ask everyone to stay muted, please, that we don't have any interruptions. And if you have any questions or technical difficulties, just put that into the group chat and Louis and I will be monitoring that. And we were just chit-chatting before about our virtual classics book club. That is our next program, which is happening tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And you can go onto our website to participate in that. And again, please subscribe to our email newsletter. We have a lot of stuff going on that's really fun, like tonight. And we are just super excited to have all you guys visit with us. So without further ado, I will turn this over to John. Oh, and just one more note, since we are recording it, we will put it on our library YouTube channel, and we're going to keep that up for until the end of December as a holiday program. So thank you so much, and John, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. First, a little bit about me for those of you who are new to me. For those of you who do not know me, I'm John Kenrick. I am an entertainment historian who specializes in musical theater, film, and television. I have a website, musicals101.com, a book, Musical Theater, A History, which is a worldwide standard in the subject. And it's a real honor to meet with you tonight here on Zoom and on behalf of Morristown Library, talk about one of my favorite parts of the Christmas season. I don't know about you, but for me, it just isn't Christmas until I have reread, reheard, rewatched some version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Let's go right into our video. How Dickens reshaped Christmas with a ghost story. Well, if he reshaped it, the question before getting into that would have to be, how did Christmas, a celebration of December 25th, happen or become a reality in the first place? You might be surprised to know that celebrations on December 25th did not begin with the birth of a child in Bethlehem 2,020 years ago. They go back to time immemorial. Because on the old Roman calendar, the pre-Christian calendar, December 25th marked the date of the winter solstice. That's the day every year when the Earth's axis was at its furthermost tilt away from the sun, plunging all of the northern half of the planet into winter, the longest night and the shortest day of the year. No one knows to this day exactly who or when the Stonehenge complex was constructed. But this ancient culture, thousands of years ago, comprehended that December 25th was a day when the sun began reclaiming the sky, and they aligned these massive stones to make that moment visible. The Romans recognized this same astronomical fact. They called December 25th Natalis Sol Invictus, the birthday of the unconquered sun, the day the sun begins to reconquer the skies. This coincided with a 5 or 6 day celebration in ancient Rome, sources differ, that was called the Saturnalia, a feast of the god Saturn that involved all kinds of self-indulgence and excess, drinking, feasting, sexual orgies, all manner of rules went out the window. With all that celebrating going on, it has long been theorized that early Christians chose to celebrate the birth of Christ during late December because their celebrations could easily take place under the cover of Rome's pagan celebrations. But it's now believed by scholars that this was a mistake, that Christians chose December 25th because just as they believed Christ had died at the time of the spring equinox in March, so it was that he would have been born at the time of the winter solstice, which means that but that all gets terribly complicated. Let me just tell you, it's now not believed that Christians were trying to hide out under a Roman holiday. Whether pagan or Christian, midwinter celebrations, because of the long nights, have traditionally involved ghost stories. My Irish ancestors would gather around the peat fires at night in the bleak midwinter and would share stories of the ghosts and the banshees that haunted Ireland. So it was quite sensible for Charles Dickens, the great British author, to commemorate Christmas with a ghost story, because that's exactly what a Christmas carol is, a ghost story. We have continued that tradition in modern times. Tim Burton's film, The Nightmare Before Christmas, has become a modern classic, and that too is filled with ghosts and creatures of horror. A Christmas Carol has been dramatized for the stage countless times. There are always new versions popping up. It's been filmed more than 50 times. Back in 1994, the theater at Madison Square Garden, not the big arena, but the side theater, premiered a lavish new version of A Christmas Carol, a musical, that ran till the year 2003. Every year, it was so popular that every year they brought it back with a new male star as Scrooge. It has a score by Alan Menken, the Academy Award-winning composer of Beauty and the Beast, and lyrics by Lynn Ahrens, who wrote the score for Ragtime. In 2004, that version was filmed for television, produced by and starring Kelsey Grammer as Scrooge, TV's Frasier, and as the ghost of Jacob Marley, Jason Alexander, who's well known from a Tony-winning Broadway actor, and of course, one of the stars of Seinfeld. If you think I'm overstating it when I say that A Christmas Carol is a ghost story, here you'll see Jacob Marley, Scrooge's partner who has been dead for 7 years, coming back from the grave. And he lays out the plot of A Christmas Carol pretty clearly, and does so in a way that definitely gets Scrooge's attention, even if it happens to at times sound a little bit like Fiddler on the Roof.
There's more of great
collaboration. Why do you walk the earth? And why do you trouble me?
It is required of every man that his spirit travel far, lending help to those he can, no matter who they are. But if you don't go forth in life, spreading joy and easing pain, your spirit will go forth in death, and you shall wear a chain. These were coins I hoarded for a rainy day. Now everything will be locks and keys that helped me keep the poor away. That's what put these locks and keys around my waist. Link by link, my chain was getting longer. Link by link, I should have heard it clink. Link by link, each year a little stronger. Link by horrifying link. Stacking up my silver and my bits of gold, filling up my vault when day was done. Well, vaults are made of lead and cash is very cold, and around your neck they weigh a bloody ton. Link by link, in blood red ink, unlock your heart to play, dragging something more than twice this way.
No, please.
Ebenezer Scrooge,
Yes?
you shall be visited by 3 ghosts.
No, thank you.
When the clock strikes 1, the ghost of Christmas past.
I prefer not to think about the past.
When the clock strikes 2, the ghost of Christmas present. When the clock strikes 3, the ghost of Christmas yet to be. 3 ghosts who yet may stop you ending up like me.
You remember our colleague, Mr. Haynes? Mean to the bone he was.
Yes, definitely a ghost story. It was in 1843 that Charles Dickens penned A Christmas Carol, and that's what the original edition of it looks like. In another version of the story, a musical Scrooge with music and lyrics by the wonderful Leslie Bricusse. It starred Albert Finney as Scrooge, a big screen hit. A wonderful British actor named David Collings played the part of Bob Cratchit, and here he is with his children. And he's out shopping with them on Christmas Eve, preparing for what we seem to think was a traditional Victorian Christmas. Listen to some of the things that they'll be singing about.
Christmas children peep into Christmas windows, see a world as pretty as a dream.
Christmas trees and toys, Christmas hopes and joys,
Christmas puddings rich with Christmas cream. Christmas presents shine in the Christmas windows, Christmas boxes tied with pretty bows.
wonder what's inside,
What delights they hide.
but till Christmas morning no one knows.
You with 5 children, Bob. 5 for a shilling.
Thank you, John.
Won't it be exciting if it snows?
Penny along, boy,
I suppose that children everywhere will say a Christmas prayer.
Till Santa brings their Christmas things.
All right, let me stop that right there. I love that movie and that song, but it is such an inaccurate depiction. In 1843, Santa would not have been a word used by Victorians. They simply did not have a concept. They had an idea of a creature they called Father Christmas, who was rather darker than a traditional Santa Claus. He wouldn't just put coal in a bad child's stocking. He would see to it they were punished for being bad. Christmas trees were not yet a tradition in England. Eating big Christmas birds was not, feasting wasn't even a big Christmas tradition. Giving gifts was something you did to celebrate the new year, not to celebrate Christmas. We just totally misunderstand what Christmas was like at the time Charles Dickens published his book. To understand how England had lost Christmas traditions, we have to go back in time somewhat to medieval London. Back in medieval times, the British knew how to celebrate Christmas. It was a huge festival. From the time that Henry VIII reigned until his last daughter, Elizabeth I, finished her reign, Tudor Christmases were not just a day, they were a season of celebration. They brought in the evergreens. They literally decked the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. They had massive feasting that went on not just for a day, not just for a week, but for 12 days. That marvelous song, The 12 Days of Christmas, the British celebrated starting on Christmas Day, and it would last all the way until what is called Twelfth Night. Each of the days had different spiritual and non-spiritual connotation. For example, one of the days was the Feast of Christ's Circumcision. Now, that may surprise some people to learn that Christians celebrate Christ getting circumcised, but yes, that was one of the big feasts of Christmas. There was also one of the days was when you would go mumming. Mumming involved putting on outrageous costumes, animal heads that completely hid a person's identity. And while you were in costume on that day, you could more or less get away with anything short of a genuine crime. You could do things to humiliate neighbors. You could get even with enemies, but you couldn't go raping or murdering. That was definitely not accepted. Today, mummery, whether it's in England or here in the United States, they have a mummers parade in Philadelphia every year. It's simply a celebration of outrageous costumes. It's quite innocent now, but it had a less than fully innocent connotation in Old England. One thing that was fairly innocent was caroling. People would go from house to house singing for their friends and neighbors, and your friends and neighbors could either throw some money in a bowl to thank you for your efforts if it was someone wealthy, or if they knew you, they'd welcome you in for some hot punch and for a bite to eat. And it was just a way of friends to go to celebrate the season. Twelfth Night itself, the last night of the celebration, was eventually commemorated, according to tradition, at the request of Queen Elizabeth I, by William Shakespeare writing one of his most popular comedies, Twelfth Night. It is now, of course, one of the most popular of all his works and is not just celebrated as some kind of a holiday season event. It's done all times of the year. The Great British celebration of Christmas came to an end with the British Civil War, when Puritans rebelled against the reign of King Charles I. In 1649, it went so far that he had to be beheaded. Here you see him being beheaded in front of his palace in Whitehall. And government went into the hands of the Puritan general, Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell, as Lord Protector of England, knew only too well about the pagan roots of Saturnalia and how those had affected Christmas. So he and the Puritan Parliament declared all celebration of Christmas to be illegal, satanical and illegal. So mumming, going around in masquerade, illegal. Feasting, illegal. Christmas pudding could get you fined or jailed. I'm not exaggerating. This is the truth. And Christmas caroling, just as illegal as all the other traditional observations. It stayed that way until 1660 with the restoration of the monarchy under King Charles II. Now, King Charles brought back a sense of fun to England. The Puritan dreariness was eased, but it took a long time for people to even think about going back to Christmas. It had been so drummed out of their, once a habit is broken, it's hard to reignite it. So feasting returned, but not all of the other paraphernalia of Christmas. By the time of the 1800s, the life of Charles Dickens, Christmas existed. It was primarily a religious observance. Those who were devout Christians would go to church on Christmas Day. Catholics, of course, would celebrate the night before with midnight mass. But Charles Dickens, when he was born in 1812, came into a world where Christmas was at best a minor holiday. Most people worked on Christmas Day. Stores stayed open, most businesses did not take any kind of time off for Christmas. He, however, had a father, John Dickens. The good news is John Dickens instilled in his son a deep love of Christmas. The bad news is that John Dickens was a financially irresponsible man. He spent far more than he earned and continually got in trouble for it. And when Charles Dickens was just a small boy, he saw his father go into debtor's prison. In those days, if you owed money and you couldn't pay it, you went to jail. You didn't just get, garnished. You went to jail. First, he saw his father interred in what was called a sponging house. This was a low-security prison where people could come to visit you easily, and you could sponge off them and try to beg from your friends, relatives, the money that was needed to pay your debt. He was not able to get his debt paid by any relative, and so he was sent to Fleet Prison. He was imprisoned alongside the lowest of the low, murderers, burglars. And there's Charles Dickens' father, who had been a civil servant, is now among these people. And those who were in the debtors section of the prison were allowed to use a window where they could beg for money from passersby. Now, little Charles was not off the hook while his father was in prison. He was old enough, as far as the government was concerned, to go to work to help start paying off his father's debt. For a couple of pennies a week, I'm not making this up, this boy was sent to work in Warren's blacking factory. This is an actual painting of the factory, where he worked gluing labels onto jars of boot blacking, stuff that was used to waterproof and blacken boots. It was nasty, smelly, dirty work. And because he had to make sure that the labels were put on correctly and attractively, he and the other label boys had to work in windows where anyone passing by saw them and knew that these were kids laboring in poverty and usually in some kind of disgrace. It was a horrible nightmare, and it gave Dickens a lifelong passion to speak out for the poor, to speak out for those who were the victims of this kind of insane system. He grew up to become a very successful writer, and he did so in an innovative way. He published novels not as large, expensive books, but as chapters, a chapter, a chunk at a time, that people could buy for pennies. And over the course of a year or 2 years, those chapters added up to a book. His first serialized novel, The Pickwick Papers, known originally as The Pickwick Club, started selling around 4,000 copies a month. By the time he was done, he was selling around 40,000 copies a month. That led to another highly popular serialized novel, Oliver Twist, to another, 1838, Nicholas Nickleby. These serialized novels made him the most popular author in the English-speaking world. In 1841, he began serializing The Old Curiosity Shop. By this point, Dickens was such a sensation in both Britain and America. Well, let me put it to you this way. One of the key events in The Curiosity Shop is the death of little Nell. Your heart just aches for this character. And Dickens had so built up to this event, and people were so curious, that when ships from England entered New York Harbor carrying the latest chapter, boatloads of fans would try to intercept these ships and scream up, "Is Nell dead? Is she dead?" And the sailors would just smile and not answer and let the public find out by buying the darn chapter like they would have to. In 1843, Dickens had published his newest serialized novel, The Life and Adventures of Martin Chuzzlewit. It's never been his most popular work. And that was true even at the beginning. The sales were disappointing, down from what they had been with the Old Curiosity Shop. So he was wondering, have I worked the serializing thing to its end? Do I need to try another approach? That year, he also read a new government report on the employment of children in Great Britain. He, like many others, was appalled to see how children were used, how they were chattel and used like human garbage in England. He also went on a visit that year to the Saffron Hill School, supposedly a charitable school that provided educations for poor girls and boys, only to find out that this was a place that treated the children horribly. He was aghast at what he saw. On October 5th of 1843, now this is where the story of the writing of A Christmas Carol really begins. He went to give a lecture in Manchester, UK. Manchester is one of the great industrial cities of northern Britain. But someone in Dickens' time said that with the constant industrial smoke and fog that filled the streets of that city, that Manchester could be better looked at not as a gateway to Britain, but as a gateway to hell. One of the brightest lights in the culture of that city was its new Athenaeum. Athenaeums were the first public libraries. There's one in Boston, built around the same time. The Manchester Athenaeum was a membership public library. For a couple of pennies a year, no matter how rich or poor you were, you could buy a membership in this library and borrow books, attend lectures, and generally educate yourself. This was a tremendous advance in Western culture. Right next door to the Athenaeum is a building that still stands. It's called the Free Trade Hall. It may not look like much here, but inside it is massive. It holds thousands of people at one time. And it was here that Dickens was going to give a lecture to help raise money for the Athenaeum. On the same bill was the great Benjamin Disraeli, who was at the early part of his career. He would go on to be Prime Minister of England twice in the course of his parliamentary career. But Dickens was definitely the star speaker on this occasion. The audience loved what he had to say. He was a charismatic presence on any stage. But he realized that speaking out against poverty was not his strongest weapon. He knew that writing was his weapon, one that he could use to deal a sledgehammer blow to society, to open people's minds to empathy for the poor. And so, sitting in his study, this is one of his later studies, not the one he had at that time, but this relates to a very famous sketch. Dickens began creating in his mind. Characters came to mind. He would walk the streets of London at night and he would see someone. He would hear a name. He would get a bit here, a bit there. And he started building a story about greed, generosity, and the milk of human kindness. He also was building on an idea that he had first put forward in his Pickwick papers. It's the story of the goblins who stole a sexton. In this story, a sexton who is very judgmental of people who he doesn't think are good or good enough, is kidnapped by a group of goblins who take him away from his church and basically read him the riot act about being an ungenerous creep. And just, you need to open up your heart, my friend. They do not take him through the past, present, and future. All of that would be a new aspect to the story. But it's certainly a precursor of what would happen in A Christmas Carol. There's a delightful movie which is in our library's DVD collection called The Man Who Invented Christmas. Dan Stevens, who was so wonderful in Downton Abbey as the heir to Downton Abbey in the first few seasons, he plays Charles Dickens, conceiving and writing A Christmas Carol. And the part of Scrooge as that character comes to life in his mind is played by the brilliant Christopher Plummer. In this scene, Dickens has been chatting with his maid, and she asks about one of the names she heard him mumbling as she had walked into the room.
Who is Scrimple?
Scrimple?
When I come in, you were saying...
Oh, it's just a name for a story I'm concocting. Get the name right, and then, if you're lucky, the character will appear. He's not here yet. Scrantish. Come on. Scrunge. Come on. Come on, you sinner. Scrooge.
Shut the window. You think I'm made of money?
Mr. Scrooge. How delightful to meet you, sir.
Sorry, I can't say the same.
Come now, don't be standoffish. We ought to be friends.
Don't have friends, don't need them.
Naturally. I know, let's play a game.
Don't like games.
Oh, humor me. What do you think of when I say the word darkness?
Cheap.
Love.
Swindle.
Money.
Security.
Children.
Useless.
Workhouse.
Useful.
Christmas.
Christmas?
That's right.
Any writer will tell you that is the frustration you feel when everyday life intrudes on the writing process. In the course of the film, Dickens walks the streets of London with his character until finally his character simply will not leave him, demanding that the book be finished. It's a brilliant, entertaining film, and I highly recommend it. It's not a documentary about the writing of this book, but it does give the human side of Dickens' experience writing it. He literally stalked the streets of London all through October and early November of 1843, working his way through the story, developing the characters. And he brought so many street characters into A Christmas Carol. In 1956, there was a very well-received TV musical version of A Christmas Carol called The Stingiest Man in Town. The Four Lads were a Canadian boys singing group. They had had several big hit recordings, including the best-selling Standing on the Corner Watching All the Girls Go By. They play a group of street toughs, street guys, who watch Scrooge mistreat a ragman, and then they explain to him, don't waste your time with him, and they explain why he's called the stingiest man in town. The role of Scrooge here was played by Hollywood's own Sherlock Holmes and the Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Basil Rathbone.
Evening, Governor. Any old rags, bones, bottles cluttering up your house that I could relieve you of? Oh, Harry Hawkins, sir. rag picker at your service.
Rag picker, eh? I bet you make a fine haul the day after Christmas.
Aye. Empty bottles, sir. Hundreds of them. Some of them ain't all empty.
You've got all that enterprise. Salvaging trash, you're just the kind of man this country needs.
Then, you do something for me, sir.
Yes, I certainly will. If you can think of a way to keep this government from squandering money, I'll nominate you for a seat in Parliament.
Don't make them, Scrooge. You're wasting your talents.
Oh, Scrooge is such a stingy man, the tightest man since time began. Oh, he's so tight, I say, he wouldn't give a bride away. It hurts him so to pay 1 cent, he wouldn't pay a compliment. He uses lightning bugs at night to save that cash he'd pay for life. How can anybody be so stingy, so stingy, so stingy? How can anybody be so stingy? He's the stingiest man in town. When he goes by, the children hiss. No other man as tight as this. One day he skinned an alley cat to make himself a winter hat. He has a house that's very tall, with flowered paper in the hall. And for his mother's funeral, he cut the flowers off the wall. How can anybody be so stingy, so stingy, so stingy? How can anybody be so stingy? He's the stingiest man in town. And when his nurse shows rolling fly, no man alive is going to cry. But you can bet his ghost will curse, because he's paying for the hearse. And when it's time for him to go, his soul will travel down below. And when he gets there, you can tell, because you'll hear old Satan yell. You'll hear old Satan yell. How can anybody be so stingy, so stingy, so stingy? How can anybody be so stingy? He's a stingiest man.
Two of the most iconic characters in A Christmas Carol are Scrooge's secretary, Bob Cratchit, and his little crippled son, Tiny Tim, who rides his father's shoulder, clings to his crutch. Many people have wondered over the years, what is it that's wrong with Tiny Tim? The story never quite says it. Well, Dickens' audiences would have definitely understood hearing about a poor boy with those symptoms because most doctors today agree he had rickets. Rickets was caused by malnutrition and a lack of sunlight, lack of vitamin D. So if Tiny Tim was if Scrooge reached out to the Cratchit family and gave his father more money and showed some love to this child, he would definitely get the kind of nutrition and the kind of exposure to the outside world that would have improved his health. This character has been depicted so many different ways. In 1938, Gene Lockhart played Bob Cratchit. Little Terry Kilburn, who was in so many films, starred in as these characters in the MGM version, 1938. One of my favorite versions of A Christmas Carol is Mickey Mouse's Christmas Carol. Mickey plays the role of Bob Cratchit, and a little mouse plays his son, Tiny Tim. I should explain, in the Disney world, since Mickey and Minnie were a couple, they say traditionally, oh, well, that's one of Mickey and Minnie's kids playing Tiny Tim. I will tell you, this is the only version where I am genuinely moved by the death of Tiny Tim. When you see the beloved Mickey Mouse clinging to his son's crutch, falling to his knees by the boy's grave and shedding a tear, I sorry, I can't imagine a Disney fan not being moved. Another Disney version is A Muppet Christmas Carol, produced by the Disney Company. In this, of course, Kermit the Frog plays Bob Cratchit. Now, in the Muppet universe, it's just fun to note this. Although Miss Piggy and Kermit were a couple, they never had children. So the little frogs who play with him in various stories are his nieces and nephews. And that's his nephew portraying Tiny Tim on his shoulder. Don't ask me, talk to Mr. Henson. Dickens, let's get back to him. In 1843, he needed illustrations for his book because he wanted it to be a gorgeous present for the holiday season. So he went to John Leech, who was one of the leading illustrators of the day, and said, look, I need a set of color plates and I need a set of sketches for this book. John Leech turned out illustrations that remain classics to this day. Here is the original conception by Mr. Leech of Scrooge being accosted by the ghost of his partner, Jacob Marley, the chain around his waist, the candlelight flaming in the presence of the ghost. There is a new stage version, which is currently available for viewing online. If you pay for admission, you can see it's called A Christmas Carol Live, and you can find it with a simple search in Google. Jefferson Mays does a one-man version of the story. Now, this was filmed during this COVID crisis that we've all been living through in socially distant conditions. Everyone was safe. Notice that there's a plastic face guard on the cameraman. Here is just a brief scene from this new version.
The hour itself, and nothing else. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Scrooge found himself face to face with a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on its skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, yet its dress was trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible. Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold me?
I am.
But who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
What business brings you here?
Your welfare. Rise and walk with me.
The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication. Oh, I am mortal and liable to fall.
There but a touch of my hand. There. And you shall yet held in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall. The city had entirely vanished, along with the darkness and the mist. It was a clear, cold winter day, and they stood upon a country road with snowy fields on either side. And Scrooge was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
If Jefferson Mays is familiar to you, he was the Tony-winning star of I Am My Own Wife and Tony winner for the wonderful Broadway musical comedy, A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. Interestingly, in the original Christmas Carol, this is the only depiction of the ghost of Christmas past. It is the moment when Scrooge has grabbed a horn of time out of the spirit's hand and is forcing it down over his head, trying to make him disappear. If you go by Dickens' description of what the ghost of Christmas past looked like, the most accurate depiction in a popular film version would be when Joel Grey played the part in the 1999 TV production starring the wonderful British actor Sir Patrick Stewart. The Ghost of Christmas Present. Here is from the original edition of A Christmas Carol. He looks very much like a traditional version of the British Father Christmas, but he is robust, lusty, in love with life. By the time he departs Scrooge, however, he shows him a harrowing image of the two children who cling to his legs. And with this scene, Dickens was giving the world a warning that these children, called ignorance and want, were what truly threatened peace and prosperity in the world, that these were the beginnings of revolution and destruction. Perhaps the most beloved of all film versions, and I will admit my personal favorite, is the 1951 film in England called Scrooge, in America called A Christmas Carol, starring British comic actor Alastair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge. This man simply brings dimensions to Scrooge that no other actor did. And here is how they depicted the ghost of Christmas Present and those horrifying children.
Where are you taking me now? My time with you, Ebenezer, is almost done. Will you profit by what I have shown you of the good in most men's hearts? I don't know. How can I promise? If it's too hard a lesson for you to learn, then learn this lesson. Spirit, are these yours? They are man's. They cling to me for protection from their fetters. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, but most of all, beware this boy.
But have they no refuge, no resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
Yes, that is the entrance of the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. One of the most horrifying figures in popular culture. When I was a small child, I had no trouble watching Margaret Hamilton play the Wicked Witch of the West. That never scared me as a kid. Watching Alastair Sim's Christmas Carol, that ghost always got to me. I would have trouble sleeping that night. Here is the original illustrator's vision of that icy specter. He is introducing Ebenezer Scrooge to his own grave, letting him know that his own death is imminent, that it's over, that he must pay the price for his life of greed and his lack of compassion. Here, from that same movie, that the moment of Scrooge's terror and redemption.
Spirit, no, 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 no. Tell me I'm not already dead. Tell me I'm not already dead. Tell me I'm not already dead. You, Spirit, I'm not the man I was. Believe me, I'm not the man I was. Why show me all this if I'm beyond all hope? Oh, pity me, Spirit, pity me, and help me. Help me to sponge away the writing on the stone if I repent. And I do repent, I do repent. I'll make good the wrongs I've done my fellow men. I'll change. I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was. Believe me, I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was. I'm not the man I was. I'm not.
Good morning, sir.
Tell me, what day is it?
What day? What's Christmas Day, of course, sir?
Christmas Day. Christmas Day. Then I haven't missed it. The spirits must have done everything in one night. But of course, they can do anything, can't they? Of course they can.
Are you quite yourself, sir?
What? I don't know. No, I don't think so. I hope not.
What?
The curtains are still here. They're still here. You didn't tear them down and sell them. They're here now. Everything's here. I'm here. And the shadows of things that would be can still be dispelled. And they will be. I know they will be. I know. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. I've never. A Merry Christmas, Ebenezer. You old humbug. And a Happy New Year, as if you deserved it. Oh, Merry Christmas, Mrs. Dilber.
Same to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And many, many of them.
Likewise.
Yes. Look, Mrs. Dilber, there's the corner where the spirit of Christmas present sat. And there's the door where Jacob Marley's ghost came through. And there's the window where I saw the wandering spirit. It's right, it's true, it all happened. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been amongst the spirits. I don't know anything. I never did know anything. But now I know that I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I never did know anything. But now I know that I don't know. All on the Christmas morning. And I must stand on my head. I must stand on my head.
If you want to know why British productions like this, like our beloved Downton Abbey, are so wonderful, I think one of the key reasons is that every supporting actor in these great films and TV shows is so remarkable. That woman playing Mrs. Dilber, Kathleen Harrison, never became a huge star outside of England, but her reactions to Alastair Sims' a sudden joy out of this evil, vile, nasty man, that makes the scene all the more priceless. It's those supporting actors. At the Morgan Library in New York City, J.P. Morgan may not have been the nicest of men. He was certainly somewhat Scrooge-like in his own way, but he loved to collect manuscripts. All of the original Gilbert and Sullivan manuscripts are in that collection. So is Charles Dickens' original handwritten manuscript of A Christmas Carol. And it was this manuscript. Now you can see here, this is the very first page. with all the handwriting is rather good for those of us who were lucky enough to learn cursive writing. This is very easy to read. However, with all those little corrections and and carrots, and I pity the poor typesetter who had to work from this. They managed to get this book to bookstores in London just before Christmas. He had started in October. The book was on bookstore in bookstore windows by the end of December. The first edition was just 6,000 copies. It was sold out in just a few days. The book was a massive popular hit. Any one copy in mint condition of that original edition would be worth $45,000 or more today, depending upon certain, little, there are technical items. The end papers were originally one color. He switched to another color that wouldn't, there was a yellow that would rub off on your hands. He switched over to a green end paper instead, for example. That same year, all other sorts of things, quite accidentally, the accidents of history, came together. I tell you as a history teacher, some things are intentional in history. Some things are just accidents. It is a total accident that in 1843, a very highly respected civil servant, Henry Cole, who had been knighted by Queen Victoria, decided that he was too busy to send out his usual handwritten messages wishing people a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. That was just a personal thing of his. He was busy working with Prince Albert, planning for just 2 years down the line. They were going to hold the world's first World's Fair, and they were going to build a huge crystal palace in which to house that fair. So being too busy, he hired an artist named John Calcutt Horsley to design a set of pre-printed cards, and here is one of them, with the original handwriting on it, sent off to one of that knight's friends. His friends so loved this idea. Oh, wow, a card that saves you all the effort of writing a full-length letter, that within 1 to 2 years, people were printing their own private Christmas cards. And by 2 years, people started buying them in stores, pre-printed and available to anyone who could buy a card. 1843 was also the year that people noticed for the first time that Prince Albert, who was born in Germany, had initiated a tradition in the royal family of decorating the Windsor Castle with greenery, with candles and Christmas trees, with boughs and all. He brought back all these wonderful traditions, but from his German childhood. This became popular because for the first time, prints were published of these Christmas trees as they appeared in Windsor Castle. Here you see how it was recreated for the recent British TV series Victoria. Now, A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Moore, that wonderful poem, "'Twas a night before Christmas and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse," that had been around since 1823. And it's in there that we first see the popular vision of old St. Nicholas as a sort of a Santa character, but they didn't call him Santa, they called him St. Nicholas. How does our own Morristown fit into all of this? Well, years after A Christmas Carol, years after Clement Moore's poem had become a classic, Thomas Nast was a leading political cartoonist. In the years following the Civil War, he would help bring down Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed with his famed cartoons. But in 1862, he created an illustration of jolly old St. Nick that would prove a keystone moment in the evolution of Santa Claus. Suddenly, here we see Clement Moore's jolly old elf as a generous gift-giving sweetheart. which was not the traditional vision of St. Nicholas that came from Northern Europe. Oh no, he was seen as a generous, but also a strict figure. Dickens, in the years that followed A Christmas Carol, went out and started giving public readings of his works. And he was at heart an actor. He loved performing. He was absolutely riveting on stage. When he toured Britain and America, he could get as many as 3,000 or 4,000 people to pack a room. And the one thing people wanted to hear the most from him were readings of A Christmas Carol. So he developed an hour-and-a-half long, a 90-minute long version of the material that he could perform as a, if that was your entertainment, come see him do this. And he performed every character. He mesmerized audiences with this. And he was performing it right up until the time of his death in 1870. He had literally worked himself to death at the age of 58. It was that performing edition that Patrick Stewart brought to Broadway, and he did it for several Christmases in a row to packed houses. Currently, it is performed by one of his descendants, Gerald Charles Dickens, who is a great-great-grandson of Charles Dickens, and he tours both Britain and America doing his grandfather's one-man version of A Christmas Carol. This year, adding to Christmas Carol's legacy, the Isle of Man issued a set of stamps that uses those original illustrations from the first edition in glorious original color. What a wonderful addition to the Christmas Carol legacy this is. I want to finish off with one more scene from the 1951 Alastair Sim version. You want to talk about the reactions of a great actor. Mervyn Johns, not well known in America, but he's appeared in other films and TV shows over the years. And here he is as Bob Cratchit, totally caught off guard by he thinks he's about to get fired the day after Christmas because he showed up late. And suddenly he meets the new Scrooge. And what a perfect way to end this talk with the actual words that Dickens gave to Tiny Tim.
It's only once a year, so it won't be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
I'm sure you were. Well, we won't beat about the bush, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, which leaves me no alternative but to raise your salary. I haven't taken leave of my senses, Bob. I've come to them. From now on, I want to try to help you to raise that family of yours, if you'll let me. Well, anyway, we'll talk it over later, Bob, over a bowl of hot punch. Meanwhile, you just go and put some more coal in that fire. And you go straight out and buy a new coal scuttle. Yes, and you do that before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. No, I don't deserve to be so happy. I can't help it. I just can't help it.
Scrooge was better than his word. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. And to Tiny Tim, who lived and got well again, he became a second father.
Uncle Scrooge!
And it was always said that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
For those who are interested, I do have a book, Musical Theater, A History, which has been a bestseller for some years on Amazon. You can find it there. There's a paperback edition. And if you want to know about any place else that I'm giving talks in the near future, you can always find out on my website, musicals101.com. Sells nothing. It is 800 pages on the history of musicals on stage, screen, and television. With that, let me end the screen share. Oh, how nice to see all of you out there. And let me look in chat and see if we have questions. Okay. Yeah, I apologize about the audio. There's something in the internet connection that's not optimal right now, so I do apologize for those who are here have had some trouble with the audio. Let's see. Why Ebenezer? Ebenezer is a great sounding name. Think about it. It is so perfect. Ebenezer Scrooge. It sounds like he's literally as he says in the text, a scrunching, grasping, covetous old sinner. The name is so alive. I love the George C. Scott version. Elizabeth Matson asked about it. I think it's superbly done. George C. Scott is out of this world. I was very sorry that last Christmas I did not get to see his son play the role of Scrooge on Broadway. They did a new production of A Christmas Carol. I would love to see, hopefully that will have another life as theater comes back to life. Oh, sure, there are more than 50 versions on television and film. The Jim Carrey version is brilliantly Harrow asks, the Jim Carrey version is brilliantly animated. It's wonderful to see also how closely it sticks to the Dickens. I think the best versions, like the Sim version, stick to the Dickens. Someone said they love seeing my cat in the corner. Well, there's an army of them here. This is a house owned by 9 cats that allow 2 humans to live here. They are all rescues. The oldest is 15, the youngest is 4 months of age, and tomorrow he's going in for the big snip because all of our cats are spayed and neutered. They are properly cared for. And for those of you who are here in Morristown, all of our cats come from 911 Dog and Cat Rescue. That is the rescue run by Samantha, who is Morristown's animal control officer at Town Hall. She did not want to ever have to unnecessarily destroy the animals that she finds and saves here in town. So this wonderful organization that works through Morristown Animal Hospital saves these animals, gives them proper medical care, and makes them available for inexpensive adoption. And none of the creatures who they find here in town, none of the dogs or cats is ever destroyed unless it is a necessary health move, if they're beyond care. And oh, how we love these guys. Several of them are special needs, and they are the joy of our lives. Yes, Marlo Thomas did a version. Henry Winkler did a version. Vanessa Williams. There have been versions that have been part of sitcoms. There are all kinds of characters. There have been animated series that have done versions. Dickens anti-Semitism. That's Michael Cohen asking about that. It doesn't really show up in A Christmas Carol. It's more of an issue in Oliver Twist. The character of Fagin is a very ugly stereotype. In the original novel, Dickens refers to him dozens of times simply as the Jew or that Jew. So they constantly remind you of his ethnicity. In the 1948 film version by David Lean that's very famous, Alec Guinness gave an unforgettable performance, but the only thing broader than his nose, the prosthetic nose, was his accent, which he did as a very thick Semitic accent, which is not suggested in the book. Most dramatizations since then of Oliver Twist have gone out of the way to make Fagin a Cockney, not a vicious Jewish stereotype. And it would not be until later in his life when he befriended some Jews that he began to realize that hatred was pointless, that it was just stupid bigotry, and he was able to get past it. Is the script that Dickens wrote for himself to perform available to read? It does exist in different, it's cared for in different archives. I've never seen it, but I'd love to read it. I wish someone would put it out there. I do not know of it being out there online, but things are constantly being put onto the internet that weren't there before. One can only hope to see. Oh, Harrow, that's you, Andy Dickerson, one of my students from NYU. Andy, good to see you're here, good friend. Wonderful man. Vanessa Williams, A Diva's Christmas Carol. There's nothing guilty about that pleasure. It's an intelligently done show. No, I agree with Louise and Dave. No shame at all. Do I believe Madison Square Garden will bring it back? They did it for 10 full years, and they've been doing very different things there since. At that time, Madison Square Garden Theater was also run by the same company that was running Radio City Music Hall, and they thought it was profitable to have two different Christmas shows. Oh, yes, Dave Meyer, you're right. The snow at the end of that Madison Square Garden production, when it snowed all over the front of the theater, that was a glorious final touch. And it was a lot of fun to see. And yes, I would go back to see it too. I agree with everyone. It has been called the Paramount, but now they just call it the theater at Madison Square Garden. And every now and then they rename it after some company that's willing to pay for the privilege of having the theater named after them. Were there any other questions? Anyone? Linda Carrington, why don't you unmute yourself? Hi, Linda.
Do you want me to write it?
No, speak to me. Say it.
So Alistair Sim's version is my favorite, and I'm particularly interested in the beginning when Scrooge leaves his dinner and goes to his home, and he puts his hand up to the door knocker, and he sees Marley's face in the door knocker. And I wondered if any other versions of this story include that scene, because it's really important to me.
Most versions do. The Mr. Magoo does it beautifully. The Muppet Christmas Carol turns Jacob Marley into the Marley Brothers, and it's two faces that show up in there. But it works beautifully because if you remember the Muppet Show, it's the two grouchy old men who sat up in the balcony and used to harass them on stage. Well, the two of them become the Marley Brothers. And Scrooge, the musical version, that had the face appeared as well. So yeah, it's Statler and Waldorf. Thank you, Dave Meyer, are the Muppet characters. Say again, Linda.
Oh, the reason I ask is because when Dickens' father got out of debtor's prison, they moved to Somerstown, and the door knocker on the house, so Dickens was 12, and there was a door knocker on that house. And so I assume that Dickens incorporated that experience of coming to that house with that door knocker. He incorporated that into his Christmas Carol.
That is what has been theorized by some Dickensian scholars. It's a reasonable assumption, but door knockers were so common in his time. Who knows which house it may have remained in his memory. From. He would have seen them all over the place. One of the few places you wouldn't find a door knocker would have been at Buckingham Palace. But door knockers were common. And they're a lovely thing to have. They certainly save you wrapping of the knuckles. And on those big, heavy oak doors in England, they made sense. Someone did ask a question about the 2019 FX version. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it came out last Christmas season on the channel FX. Which does, it's a Fox channel, no politics, that does movies and entertainment. And their new version was, to put it mildly, spookier than you could begin to say. The ghosts were terrifying. There were new twists to it. It was a sort of rethinking of the entire tale. At one point, Scrooge gets ready to sexually take advantage of Mrs. Cratchit. What? I mean, just strange new twists that had never been part of the story before. But it was a very new and powerful way of taking the story. Frankly, I thought it took a lot of liberties with the Dickens original, but to put it mildly, it is long past its copyright date, and you're allowed to do that now. And I don't think it did any damage because the traditional versions will still be treasured everywhere. And a new perspective may just interest new people in the story altogether. There's one person, there's a recent book that focuses on the Scrooge Marley backstory. Marley, yes, I have seen it. I think it's fascinating. And thank you for those who've enjoyed this talk. Are there any other questions? Going once, going twice.
I was going to say real quick, when someone mentioned the 2019 FX version, I thought they were referring to the 10-year ago, 2009, Jim Carrey heavily computer-generated version, which gave me nightmares as an adult.
Oh, yeah,
it was actually terrifying. I don't know if anyone remembers that.
It was terrifying, but I also thought it was a very good, it stuck to the Dickens. The closer you stick to the Dickens, in my opinion, the better. There have been versions that rearrange the ghosts. There have been versions that change the order of some of the action. Someone's asking, are there existing TV rights for the Mr. Magoo Scrooge? I do not know, but I do know it's available on DVD, so you can get it for yourself. I've had it in my collection since it was on VHS. I love that version. Younger people may not know, Mr. Magoo was very in fashion in the early 1960s, and on top of his daytime animated series for children, he did a nighttime series on network television. It took classic stories like Treasure Island, for example, and Mr. Magoo was there, you know, as Long John Silver. They even did Frankenstein, and he was Dr. Frankenstein. They may have gone a little too far with that one. My parents would not let my little 4-year-old watch that one. But when they did Dickens' Christmas Carol as the Christmas special in that series, it was a huge rating success and was shown on network television for many years. And it's still, I know it still shows up on cable. I just don't know specifically where. I don't worry about that one. I've got the DVD. I watch it whenever I want. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank my mom for tuning in. Great to see you, Mom. Thank you for being there. I want to thank the Larsons, my in-laws, for tuning in. It's always good to see you all. And I especially want to thank Mary Lynn and Luis Munoz from Morristown Library for helping put this together. Please, everyone, stay safe. Do everything to take care of yourselves so that when we get through these next few crazy months, we can look forward to the time when in the new year we can get together and start doing events live again. One of the greatest treasures in Morristown is our public library. It has been there for us. It came back as soon as it could. It is one of the richest resources for education, for entertainment, for sheer pleasure in this town. And it is my joy to do this talk and to support the library and to be part of your holiday celebration. May the best of whatever holidays you are celebrating, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it may be, and the best of the new year be with you all. And thank you all so much for taking part in this tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it so much. And right back at you. You are a treasure yourself of Morristown. So we were just delighted to have you tonight. And I just want to remind everyone, thank you so much. If you're interested in getting on our email newsletter for our future talks with John, that I hope we might be able to have in the future, as well as all of our other programming and news events, please send me an email and I'll put you on that email list. And also, I want to remind you that if you would like to watch this again and share it with your friends and family, we will be putting this recording on our YouTube channel. So you can look for it there. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And John, just going to ask you to stop the recording and